Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert panel, Building Enterprise-Grade GenAI Applications, Balancing Innovation, Security, Scalability, brought to you by our friends at AtScale, Galileo, Informatica, Nextla, Skyflow, and Vespa AI. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI community. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from all over the world to discuss the challenges and solutions for developing robust AI applications tailored to enterprise environments. The promise of AI for enterprise applications is limitless, but delivering on that promise demands a careful balance of innovation, security, and scalability. Today, you'll learn cutting-edge strategies for integrating AI into enterprise workflows to drive efficiency and innovation at scale. We'll also explore scalable architectures designed for growth and gain actionable insights into securing sensitive data and ensuring regulatory compliance. We're honored to hear from a distinguished panel of experts today. Saket Sarab, co-founder and CEO at Nextla. John Brotseth, CEO at Vespa AI. Dave Mariani, CTO and founder at AtScale. Manish Ahluwalia, field CTO at Skyflow. And Beam Manta, technical architect at Informatica. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. Next, if you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll question in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about building enterprise-grade AI applications, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar from our sponsors. Now, without further ado, I'm going to welcome all of our panelists to the stage. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So we're just going to start with some quick intros for the audience. So if you could just give us a quick introduction to yourself, what you currently do in your current organization, and your experience working with AI in enterprise settings. So I'll start with the order you appear on my screen. So Saket, why don't you kick us off with your intro?
Thank you, Brian. I'm Saket. I'm co-founder and CEO at Nextla. I come to the world of data with background in the compute land at NVIDIA for several years as an engineer, and then my prior startup building data platform in the advertising marketing tech world. At Nextla, we are solving the challenges of data variety and connecting to a variety of data and orchestrating systems to serve AI use cases. So I bring in a lot of background from that perspective.
Excellent. Welcome, Saket. John?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm John Brotseth. I'm the CEO of Vespa.ai, also co-founder. Before that, I was the architect of the platform for about 20 years since we started building it. So Vespa is a platform for solving problems where you have lots of data and you want to compute something on that data with very low latency. So search, personalization, recommendation, RAG, and so on.
Excellent. Welcome, John. Dave?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Mariani. I'm the CTO and co-founder of AtScale. AtScale is a universal semantic layer platform company. So we help customers to be able to create access to their data through a unified semantic layer. So it has high relevance when it comes to GenAI, which really needs business context. So providing business context to natural language query types of applications and agents is highly relevant. So thanks, Brian, for having me.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Beam?
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Beam, and I'm a pre-sales architect here at Informatica. I've been with Informatica for over 15 years now, half of it in professional services and the last half in pre-sales. More recently, over the last 12 months or so, we have seen a lot of our customers use our data management platform to create GenAI apps, AI agents, multi-agent architectures, and I personally have built a lot of these applications. So I'm looking forward to talking with you about the opportunities that GenAI presents, as well as some of the significant challenges that you encounter.
Excellent. Welcome, Beam. And Manish?
Hey everyone, my name is Manish. I'm field CTO here at Skyflow. I'm a veteran of the computer industry. I've worked in big data and computer security, privacy compliance for several years. Skyflow is on a mission to help folks isolate, protect, and harness their data, including for GenAI and legacy applications, whatever. So we basically help people figure out how to securely and in a compliant manner use their data for optimizing all their processes, including AI use.
Thanks, Manish. So welcome everyone, and I'll kick things off with our first substantive question. So enterprise AI adoption is, of course, accelerating, but I want to spend a moment talking about the unique challenges that organizations face when it comes to AI, enterprises face that maybe you wouldn't face in AI tools that are used by the general public, like ChatGPT. So why don't we start in reverse order this time? Manish, why don't you start with that one? What are a couple of the unique challenges that you find with respect to AI in enterprise?
Sure. So folks, when they use a lot of open AI tools, including OpenAI's AI tools, will find that you have a lot of freedom and flexibility in doing what you're doing. You choose if you're going to share your data or not. In the enterprise context, you have a lot more data, and that tools like OpenAI, Cloud, etc., would not have access to. But on the other hand, you do have a whole bunch of extra constraints that you cannot do, that OpenAI does not have to deal with, and you must when you try to use those tools to solve problems that you think are very easily solvable by these tools. So you should be able to use them in your enterprise as well. So one of the big challenges for enterprises is getting started on the huge amount of data that they have, very valuable data that they're sitting on, but they know they also along with the data also comes the compliance, the governance, the regulatory headaches on using it, and figuring out how to do this securely is the challenge. And the winners are going to be the ones who can figure out how to maximize the value of the data and the organizational expertise they have by leveraging this data in a secure and compliant manner.
Excellent points about security and compliance. Beam, what's your perspective on that one?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Manish. Data governance is very, very important. As an enterprise architect, if I have to talk about a couple of other challenges, I think integration with existing applications. I mean, your GenAI apps are not just going to talk to LLMs or vector databases. They are going to be only powerful when they reach out to your enterprise data. And some of your enterprise data is actually sitting behind legacy applications like mainframe applications. So how do you actually create a GenAI app that ties into your existing enterprise data? That integration is very, very important. And then the second one is you're trying to replace your mission critical business processes with GenAI today. So how do you account for the scalability and reliability? How can the business trust this new business process that you've created that is utilizing these LLMs? So for me, it's integration with existing systems and then scalability and reliability.
Great points, Beam. Dave, what are a couple of unique challenges that you've seen with enterprise versus AI tools for the general public?
So we're in the business of providing business intelligence to business users, and so with Gen AI, natural language query has become like a really hot topic because if people can just use English or natural language to ask questions of their data, it's much better than pointing, clicking, and using dashboarding types of tools that require much more sophistication and training. So the problem is, though, is trust and accuracy. So when you think about sort of business intelligence, if a number is wrong on a dashboard, somebody's in big trouble. It's probably somebody gets fired. And so when you think about LLMs and their tendency to hallucinate, and the difficulty of navigating a customer's data by having to do joins across different tables to compute different metrics, it can be very unreliable. And so what we found is that an LLM by itself paired with a data platform like a Snowflake or a Databricks, it gets the answer wrong 80% of the time. So what we've tried to do is couple that with a semantic layer to provide business context. to improve that accuracy and that trustworthiness. So to me, it's like I think a lot of people will be very disappointed when they want to rely on using an agent to be able to ask questions of their data, and they get the wrong answer, or they get a different answer each time that they ask. You just can't do that with business intelligence in the enterprise.
Yeah, excellent points, Dave. John, what are your key points for enterprise versus AI tools for the general public?
Yeah, I want to build on what David said and make that even more crisp by saying the quality bar of enterprise is usually much higher, right? And when we see how much effort it goes into the meeting the quality bar for consumers, as we see, I think the leading players there are people like Perplexity, which, by the way, builds on Vespa, and they put a huge amount of effort into meeting that quality bar. But I think it's even higher for enterprises. So I think enterprises who really want to do this beyond prototyping and playing around with things, but really having dependable business tools or even tools that make decisions on behalf of humans, then we really have a lot of work ahead of us on meeting that quality bar.
Great point. Saket, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I think of AI from a consumer perspective, we can use it to search things and sometimes even have fun things like have it write a poetry or something for us, right? When we think about the enterprise, it all becomes about business. Does it help us make money? Does it help us save money? Does it help us run business more efficiently? And therefore, accuracy, as folks were saying, becomes really important. So, do we end up invoicing the wrong amount or refunding the wrong person? The cost of that can be extremely high. And what really the big thing becomes is where how do we go from using AI, which maybe 75% accurate, or to what is 99% plus accuracy? And a lot of the traversal of the journey is from there. And what really matters, I think, in our experience, is all the context that it can bring in, where the variety of systems, variety of data, what is important, what is not, bring that in, have the human in the loop, all of that stuff. So enterprise, when they put something out which is AI driven, because of the cost or the impact or even regulatory sort of consequences, becomes a lot more challenging than it may seem like from the outside. And suddenly all these models, which look like magic, and trust me, they are very magical, to get them to really do the task accurately, precisely, and repeatably, is a lot of traditional enterprise work, governance, monitoring, scalability.
Yeah, excellent points all around, and touched on a variety of different challenges that are unique to enterprises. So I want to dig into some of the things that you guys just raised. So let's start with this first point about securing sensitive data. So of course, if enterprises are trying to give context to their models by leveraging their own enterprise data that's proprietary, that in many instances is subject to regulations or to significant data privacy concerns. Those are all significant considerations that have to be taken into account when then putting that data into a large language model and leveraging it for a variety of different AI applications. So what strategies or best practices can enterprises follow when they're trying to secure sensitive data for this purpose to leverage with LLMs or AI? Who wants to start with that one?
I can take that one, at least to start off with. So obviously, one of the pillars of security compliance governance frameworks is data minimization. You don't have the data, you don't have to worry about securing it, misuse, etc. Obviously, it's called data minimization, not data elimination, because if you're an enterprise, one of the key advantages you have over, like, say, a nimble 5% startup is the valuable data that you've gathered over decades, maybe. Is the team with their professional expertise in that domain that can leverage the data. So what you want is a balance that lets you use the data securely. That's exactly how you phrased the question. So you have to start with understanding that what does security what the data means depends a lot on context. Data minimization specifically, which data should you be using for this particular purpose, is the correct question to ask. And for that, you need a system where you can basically evaluate what are the legitimate uses of which data elements in your database and what should be given to the LLM or the engineer that's exploring using an LLM tool, or which tool, depending on its compliance patterns, should get access to what data. The answers will be different for a tool that's self-hosted versus a tool that's on the cloud. And you want to have the flexibility to use both, so you can use the best of breed tools to solve your problems.
So,
Yep.
if I may
Great.
add to that, actually, one thing I would say is that one way to think about approaches would be think about creating data products, and the more you can create data products, and those data products, encompass a lot of stuff that I think, Dave, you were talking about in terms of the semantic understanding of data. So now you have data products which are access to data, but they also have understanding of the data with it. Maybe it's documented by users as well. It has privacy and security controls around it, like who can access that data product. And when we kind of approach from that architectural perspective, at least what I have seen is that now you can create an agentic system where you can say, hey, this is the user asking this question, which data products are relevant? Which data products does the user have permissions for? How do we retrieve that data? And which of this data, what classification and so on can we do? And what would we then feed to the model? So my understanding is that thinking foundationally strong data management becomes pretty essential.
Yeah, just to add to what Saket said, that's exactly what I was thinking too, Saket, is that if you have a semantic understanding of your data, typically you can also secure it semantically. So you can decide who gets access to which bits based on what your understanding of that data is. And that could obviously lead all the way back to a database query when it comes to analytics. So you have to have that semantic understanding and then be able to apply the governance rules, row level security, column level security, et cetera, once you understand that, so that those controls can be injected at query time, right? So so I really think that's important, especially when it comes to using LLMs for analytics.
Yeah. And having built some of these agentic applications, I would say role-based access control, like both Saket and Jan said, is absolutely crucial. One of the other things I've personally found is you have to secure your prompt design. Prompts are the heartbeat of GenAI apps, right? If I am an architect that's building a GenAI app, I need to craft prompts carefully to, unintentionally expose sensitive information. I need to care for prompt injection. So those are some of the things that I would keep an eye out for. Prompts can make or break your application. So I would keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, those are excellent points. One of the other topics that you guys mentioned in the intro was just the significance in an enterprise context of reliability, on being able to trust the outputs that you're getting from large language models, from AI models. So how can organizations mitigate some of those risks of AI hallucinations, bias, misinformation? What should enterprises specifically be thinking about as they systematically mitigate those risks? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can do that one. So I think they should focus 90% of the time on the fundamentals. And there are just two fundamentals. It's the intelligence of the model. Smart models, just like smart humans, know in which context they should tell a story and when it's appropriate to be very factual, accurate, and so on. And the other fundamental is the relevance of the data that you are delivering to the model. This is more or less just old-fashioned information retrieval all over again, just for LLMs rather than for humans, right? You have to have all the data that might be useful, and you need to be able to query it fast, and you need to have very good relevance for the data that you deliver to the model.
I guess I would add on top of that that it's obviously context is important. So in our case, for our customers with analytics, when they apply a semantic layer, what that can do for the LLM is that if the LLM can't find a match for the prompt with semantics that are already declared, it can actually tell the user that it couldn't find the match, and then you could choose in the application about whether you just say, sorry, I don't understand that, or whether you can say, you know what, I had to compute this metric, and so I'm less confident about it. So explainability, the ability to say where you got the answer from, I think goes a long way to sort of helping the consumer better trust the results of the answer if they actually knew where it came from, or if they were sort of given some guardrails to say, you know what, I had to calculate that. I couldn't pick it off the stack.
If I may add, I think there is no doubt that better data and relevant data and more data helps reduce hallucination. I would not ignore the people side of it. If you are deploying enterprise AI, what are you telling your team? Go use AI wherever you like, take the output, believe it, or are you telling them like, hey, when you go ask this, make sure there's a check, beyond that. So you ask the question, you have private data on investments and so on, and you answer a question for an investor. Don't just copy paste that. So a lot of the training that will be needed is people understanding the limitations of the output, especially in an enterprise context, because they may come from the consumer land and say, oh, this is amazing, let's just do whatever it's saying. So I would certainly keep that process in mind, and there's a lot of training and enablement to be thought of.
Yeah, I think users are more likely to trust and adopt AI systems when they understand how the models work. And to John's point, when you have explainability built in, when you understand how and why a model evaluated a specific request the way it did, it increases confidence all around, not just from an end user perspective. As a developer or as an architect that is designing the system, you can now easily understand why a model worked the way it was supposed to or not. So I think explainability is crucial to reducing hallucinations and building trust.
One of the good things is that the model faces have become thinking models, and they actually are talking back to the user and saying, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm getting results. And I think, BM, to your point, that helps a lot with explainability and trust.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think to John's earlier point about the quality bar, I think that's a very significant consideration of all of that is when you're training people for various different situations where they may be using these outputs, what is the level of quality that is required, and then having that built into the model as well, that confidence interval, so that there's some explainability around can you or can't you trust this, and what should you trust this for, and what should you not trust it for. So all excellent points. So let's shift to this idea of architecture. Just thinking through for folks who are designing scalable AI applications, maybe they're getting out of the proof of concept stage and they're sort of thinking about what does this look like in production across this organization. Maybe we're doing this for one or two use cases today, and then we're scaling to other use cases or different sets of users in the future. What kinds of architectural decisions are important for organizations to make now as they start to try to scale these technologies moving forward?
I guess that I could take to start off there. I think that it has to start with governance, right? In terms of there needs to be. I see a lot of customers who have really locked down their data. They've locked it down because they don't feel confident that they have the controls to make it available for inspection. And we all know that AI needs data to be smart. And so if you got to start with the point where you can have confidence that your data is going to be visible to only the people that it should be visible to. And so you have to really start right back with your source data and wherever your data platform is, and make sure that you secured your data in a way that you can make it available to the widest range of users with confidence that you're not going to leak data that shouldn't be seen.
Yeah, I would I would adopt a cloud native architecture, right? I would leverage cloud platforms for their elasticity and scalability. And this is not just for foundation models or for vector databases, for example. I would also want to choose a low code, no code platform that helps me create these GenAI apps and deploy them at scale, and also reach out to my enterprise data, right? And like I said, I would want observability and explainability built into the platform. I would also want to break down applications into a more microservices driven architecture so that I can scale accordingly. And last but not the least, this is true for any enterprise application. I would want to implement like well-defined APIs for seamless integration between the different services.
Yeah, for me, I would focus on there's two things you gotta have in an enterprise. It's quality, as I mentioned, and scalability, which also goes back to, do you have all the data you need, right? And physically, there's not that many ways to organize your data and compute so that you achieve quality at scale. Specifically, you need all the data about the aspects of the same entity, document or whatever you call it, needs to be co-located on the same node. And you need to make all your machine learned or otherwise inferences that you want to make about that data to determine how relevant it is, has to happen locally on that node. And you need to scale that, of course, to many nodes, having shards of data and so on, doing all of this in parallel, right? And to actually do that, you need a platform that handles all of those aspects of your data for you.
Yeah, I'd like
No
to key in on one of the things that David was saying. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of very key decisions to be made about on-prem, cloud, which tool to use, etc. But what David said was, for a lot of enterprises, the problem isn't that there aren't enough options for cloud or on-prem or GPUs aren't available, etc. The largest problem is, how do I take this mountain of very valuable data that I'm sitting on and be sure that something won't just go wrong because some model spit out information it should not have in a context where it did not belong, where a particular team that should not have had access to some data now gets access. They have a whole bunch of obligations to their consumers, their partners, regulators that they have to meet, which is why, like, for a lot of enterprises, getting started is the problem. And a framework, a privacy, in pre-AI, we've solved a lot of these problems by putting in guardrails and frameworks around privacy by design, security by design, and not just basically slapping on security privacy when there is a problem. There are a lot of companies that do that. You hear about them in the news. But there are a lot of companies you don't hear about in terms of data breaches, etc. It's because they take security and privacy as a fundamental building block, a fundamental architectural principle. And when you do that, you have to think differently. Step one is, how do I make sure that my architecture is going to be secure and private? And if you can do that, then a whole bunch of these additional things now don't necessarily solve themselves. You still have to figure out whether you're going to use tool A or tool B, or you're going to be on-prem or in the cloud, but at least you have some guardrails around your thinking.
I would actually, if I can add, I would not underestimate the importance of choosing the right model for yourself. The cost of infrastructure when you want to run it yourself versus, having a cloud version. Where is your data? How much sensitivity do you have for your data going outside your servers and stuff? And those will be important. Also important to abstract that out. Remember that, there are newer models coming in or smaller models coming in. So don't get so tightly coupled with one that you cannot take a certain set of use cases and route it to a different one. So that's an important, I think, architectural decision to make. And also look at what are the model constraints. For example, OpenAI has a batch API. You can send it a bunch of questions and have it run at half the cost if you are willing to wait 24 hours. So keep those in mind. What are your use cases? Would you benefit from something like that potentially? And then I would definitely put evaluation of answers as part of the framework. And I think that's a challenging area, evaluating questions that are answered from a few documents versus thousands. There are different scale of challenges there, and thinking of that ultimately to tie back to your quality question and being able to have confidence in the outcome, I think is an important part of figuring out early in the journey.
Yeah, those are great points, and I think tees up one of our next questions nicely, which is once you release this into the wild, right? Once you have an AI app, how do you then continuously ensure that your apps are having their intended outputs, that they are reliable in the ways that you need them to be reliable, that they're secure? What kind of observability do you put around that? So what are you guys' thoughts about how do you ensure that this is going well once you actually put something into production?
I mean, for me, it's like people vote with their feet, right? Or vote with their, I guess, their fingertips on the keyboard. So the more users are using, consuming an agent or an application that uses GenAI, you know that it's actually delivering value. If it's wrong, people will use it once and not use it again, so you'll get your answer back in really your usage statistics in terms of how many queries you're actually satisfying. So I would track it a couple ways, right? And number one, the number of users that are interacting with my agent, and number two, the number of queries those users are being delivered would be two sort of key indicators of whether you're successful in releasing that agent. And then there's always feedback loops, like you get your thumbs up, thumbs down, etc. Not really sure how those work, and I'm not my area of expertise, but for us, at least in business intelligence applications, you know you're successful when a lot of users are relying and throwing queries at your application.
I would say that from an evaluation perspective, another thing to sort of keep in mind is, be thoughtful about what are the first use cases you're bringing out. You can go very ambitious. And as Dave said, like a few failures can really discourage the users. They come in with a lot of excitement, and then say, "Oh, it doesn't work, or it doesn't give me the answer that I was looking for." One of the other things we also looked at in that is what is the category of question. You could take a whole bunch of, let's say, documents, and you're asking a very specific question. Tell me the financial outcome of this fund in this quarter. And yes, you can ask that question, but wouldn't it be so much more useful to have the question which could synthesize those documents and give an insight, like compare these 5 different companies and tell me which one might be more relevant for investing. So I think it's important to classify that question for that. And then the output as well as the input needs to have an evaluation mechanism, which means that what questions are people asking? Guardrails become super important on that. They could be asking questions which are either not ethical or which are outside the scope that they should ask. Create a whole bunch of challenges around that. So it is possible to actually use LLMs as a way to evaluate both the questions and the output answers and score them. You can do that offline as well on a sampling basis if needed.
I mean, having been in professional services before, right, I would not take a big bang approach. I would actually roll out new versions of GenAI apps to a subset of users and then compare them against the current version that business is happy with, right? So I would do that. And then I would absolutely do feedback collection and analysis. And it's no different than how you would monitor a business critical application. I would have KPIs that I would constantly monitor. I think the two things that you would do for a GenAI app that is different from a regular business process is that feedback collection and analysis and anomaly detection, because LLMs tend to hallucinate. You regularly want to keep an eye on what are the unexpected behaviors that you might encounter from an LLM. So those are some of the things I would keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I want to just repeat what Saket said once more, because it's important. You need to build your evaluation set that evaluates the actual outcomes that you care about for a representative number of questions or tasks or whatever you're doing. And don't try to come up with my 12 numbers that I care about or something. It just should be one number. How well are you doing on that evaluation? And you can use large language models offline to help you build those evaluations, because they need to be pretty big, right? And there are great resources on how to do this online. it has become a lot cheaper than back in the old days where you had to hire people to do this for 10,000 queries and so on.
Excellent points. One of the other questions I want to get to is the idea of scale and how things change at scale. So if you've got an AI application that you're doing a POC on, or you have a small subset of users, it might not be particularly computationally intensive. It might not be that expensive. The model might perform perfectly well as intended. But as you roll that out to more and more users across the enterprise, you start to run into challenges of computational efficiency, increased costs, model performance, the model degrading in performance. So how do you as an organization in a large enterprise address those concerns proactively? How do you anticipate them? And then what do you do to actually address them? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that like any enterprise situation, scale really upends all assumptions. And what worked for 10 or 100 documents and a little bit of data suddenly just breaks apart. And I think one of the things that we have seen, for example, is that from a computational efficiency perspective, approaches like using GPUs, which may not have been feasible at small scale, suddenly do become very relevant. So we've seen that maybe even for parsing documents, at large scale, using visual models and stuff like that. So that becomes critical. I think model performance wise, as I was saying earlier, human real time matters, but then in certain use cases, you can actually take advantage of batch mechanics as well. Um, I think there's a lot to be done on the cost side of it. I would say that's coming. I think in future.
Build on a platform that allows you to scale. Not to plug my own platform, but it's true. You can't just cobble together some libraries and so on and hope it will scale, because it will not. It's a lot of hard work behind scaling well.
Yeah, and I think Saket touched on this, but strategic model selection is very important. I mean, you, depending on the use case, you will choose the models accordingly. You will choose models that balance performance requirements with computational cost, with mission critical business applications. So it's important to select the model according to the business use case need and performance.
Right. So to second what Beam said, strategic choices are obviously the right approach here. But since choice is important to cost management, it is important to give yourself the maximum number of choices possible. And to do that, if everything was complex enough, or your choice was to give it to the largest, best open foundational model, well, you probably not be very cost efficient. Yes, sure. If you have the luxury, like Saket is saying, to move them batch, you can cut the cost down by half, but you're still looking at a fairly high cost. If instead you can basically figure out an architecture where you can figure out which parts of the data set are important, like say using a semantic layer, like David would love this part, I assume. Using a semantic layer to figure out what sub questions do I ask the smart LLM versus some sub questions which can be routed to a cheaper, slower LLM that I can run on-prem, perhaps. Maybe that helps you save cost. If your data was, this is not David's thing, this is mine, but if your data was secure enough that you could, and compliant enough that you could give it to an open model, maybe you have more choices now because you don't have to keep it all on-prem. So there are a whole bunch of choices you need to make, and a whole bunch of options open up once you have the right architecture.
Good points. I want to just double click on something that we spoke about earlier. There's a good question in the chat about what should one consider when developing the evaluation sets and KPIs. So we talked about importance of measuring KPIs to ensure that your model is performing as intended, that you're getting the value that you need out of it. So what are some of those KPIs that organizations should be measuring?
As I said, I think they should keep it simple. I've seen these dashboards with lots of numbers going up and down with every version and so on, and nobody knows what to make of it. I think that's a common failure mode here, that you can always add one more thing, right? And you can argue that it gives you some information, so you should also look at that and so on. But over time, it just becomes unmanageable. So I think keeping it simple and just measure how well it's doing on your evaluation set, and then focus your attention on keeping that evaluation set track the actual real world outcomes that you care about.
I would track adoption by your key user, your key target user group, and more adoption should be better. Yeah, and obviously you want to measure the quality of the outputs, but at least you start with adoption, I would say.
Yeah, I think I agree totally with that. Like adoption matters. I would say that the the gap between the back end of the company, like you're building technology, and the very front end, which is creating, working with your customers, delivering your product, and supporting them and so on, that has to be compressed. And I would say spend as much as possible like time with those people in what they are doing, because the real KPI will be, is it making somebody's life easier? Is it making the business more efficient? Is it making more money? And actually, in our customer experience, we have seen things that would take 2 or 3 months of work are happening in a day. And it's just amazing the output that can create. And if we do that part right, then a lot of other things can be justified from a business initiative perspective. So I would spend as much time as possible, not in the technology and the code, but also with those people and seeing what job they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, great points. So the next question I have is really looking towards whether it makes sense for organizations to build their own models, or whether they should be leveraging third-party models. What is preferable for different use cases? So can you guys just speak to that? When does it make sense, do you think, to fine-tune your own models versus using third-party foundational models?
I think we'll likely see a hybrid approach, right? Enterprises are going to leverage these powerful third-party foundational models for their general capabilities, but fine-tuning the models with proprietary data is what they need for domain-specific accuracy and to address unique business needs. Because at the end of the day, data security is paramount. Compliance is very, very important, like we talked about. So I really see a hybrid approach from our standpoint.
Actually, just a question back to the group. Do you think that LLMs will become commoditized themselves, as sort of and the value is derived elsewhere in the applications or the agents? Curious what your thoughts are.
Yes.
I second that.
I think that LLMs will probably go the same route as we have seen the hyperscalers go in some extent, right? I mean, at a very low level that they can give you a compute unit, it's commoditized, but then what are the layers that they have built, above that is actually what makes them unique. I do think that, things like explainability and, improving, quality and cost and those things will matter. I do think that fine tuning itself is highly promising. Using mechanisms like LoRa can create a lot of benefits which is specific to your business and can add immediate value. Actually, fine tuning to overcome hallucination can be great. I wouldn't make that usually the first thing to go at. There's plenty of value to be extracted from existing models. Many of the things that we feel are limitations of AI, I think they're just getting improved on very rapidly. So it's a fair enough assumption to make that stick with the out of the box models, and you can take it really far with what data you have connected it to, and how you're orchestrating that, how you're using the reasoning aspect, and how it is a multi-agent system basically.
Yeah, great points. So where do you guys see, I guess, in terms of future trends? I mean, one of them is commoditized models potentially. But what are some other future trends that you guys see coming down the pike, specifically with respect to enterprise AI? What are some things that are maybe bubbling up now to the surface that over the next 3 to 5 years are going to become much more commonplace?
I think the important thing that is starting to happen now and will go on for several years, I guess, I don't know, is incorporating deep reasoning, deep research, whatever you call it, in enterprise use cases, right? And then we go from the situation where you are doing one query to find data to solve one problem to potentially doing that thousands of times to solve a single problem, right? And that, again, requires a lot of people to rethink their architecture and technology choices and so on. Latency and throughput starts mattering a lot more, also for enterprise.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was basically thinking that, to your point was that I think AI mainly started as a knowledge tool for use case perspective, but I think it's very, very quickly also heading into a business process side of aspect of things. So, how are complex business processes getting automated? So we have done that traditionally with tools like RPA and iPaaS, but in this sort of reasoning-based agentic world with mechanics like MCP, for example, and more agent to agent protocols that are coming, I feel like some of the future is heading, at least from an enterprise perspective, into that side. It's not just about asking questions, answers. So from a chatbot to a business automation sort of journey, I feel like is happening right now.
Yeah, great point, Saket. I personally know at least 2 customers that were using our iPaaS platform to build deterministic business processes before, but now they've completely automated. They've built an agentic application wherein the LLM is driving the entire orchestration, right? So AI agents are going to take over complex business processes. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We're going to see, like, we've seen customers build powerful supply chain AI assistants wherein they are in real time interacting with 5 or 6 different applications on the cloud, on-prem, getting this data that would normally require you to log into all these different applications. So that's definitely taking over. One of the other trends that I see with enterprises is a lot of them are in the POC phase. I think they will gradually move into building these enterprise grade and move into production slowly. So I think that shift from POC to production is going to happen.
I think from an analytics perspective that as long as we can get acceptable trust in accuracy in the results, I think you're going to see a lot of new business users come to the table, that the dashboard and dashboarding tools and visualization tools that we're sort of accustomed to for doing business intelligence you'll start to see more adoption of people using natural language query to get their answers rather than a point and click tools that they've been historically using for, since the beginning of analytics, past 20, 30 years.
A lot of very good points. Very hard to disagree with any of them. Just a couple of things I'd add. One is, of course, multimodal. The whole public excitement may have gotten triggered by ChatGPT, but a lot of AI work in other modalities has been going on for a very long time. And a lot of models are now multimodal as well. So whatever solution you're building, just don't think of one particular modality just because you happen to have data that works or a tool set that works best on that. Just think about how that same experience can be, the same value can be had from data in other modalities. So whatever tool you build, just make sure it works against other modalities. Otherwise, some new upstart who does better on text, voice, video will beat your purely text-based system.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. We have an interesting comment from Seth in the chat. He wants to know if how you believe enterprise organizations will leverage MCP servers. So those are model context protocol servers. Anybody want to speak to that?
I think it goes back to my very first point that I made was one of the challenges is you need to be able to talk to your enterprise data. And your enterprise data is sitting in databases, legacy applications, mainframes. So you need a common framework to talk to these applications. And if you think about agents, And we're talking about multi-agents. Agents not that you're building with your platform of choice. You're talking about third-party agents. You're talking about agents from Salesforce, ServiceNow, Informatica. You need a common layer to talk to these legacy applications, and that's where MCP will fit in. And I think I'm already seeing this. We are actually working on an MCP server that will provide this functionality for all of the legacy applications that we connect to. So I think that's absolutely going to be the future, along with agent-to-agent communication that Google just announced. So A2A and MCP are going to work. They're going to complement each other. One for talking to legacy applications, the other for communication across different agents.
Yeah, I would add that on the MCP side, actually, it will also go through certain evolution as well. Right now, one way I think about this is that the various data, various systems that you have, are becoming accessible as an MCP server. But the challenge will be orchestration across multiple of these, MCP servers. Again, governance and controls will have to be, there behind the scenes on that. But I do think that MCP itself is extremely promising in how models will connect to enterprise data. It's just that the variety of systems in the enterprise is so massive that I think that there's a layer that will be needed versus running, 100 different MCP servers for each system.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. John, anything to add there?
Yeah, I don't think MCP will have much impact at all, actually, because if there's one thing these models are good at, it's the technical side of using different APIs and protocols and so on. They are much better than humans at that, right? I always ask models to do that boring work for me, right? So, and unifying that part is what MCP is doing, right? It's not solving the much harder problem of capturing the semantics of what's behind all these different APIs, right? And I think that's still a challenge that we have, how to do that well and fine-tune the models to be able to efficiently use many different tools and so on.
Yeah, very interesting points. So we're just about out of time, so I want to get to our lightning round, which just want each of you to leave the audience with one or two thoughts as to what your most critical piece of advice is for enterprises that are looking to build scalable AI applications. So I'll start with the order you guys are appearing on my screen now with Saket.
I would focus on governance and control.
Great. Beam?
I was going to say governance, but that's probably the most important thing. Having built these applications in the last 1 year or so, I would focus on a low-code, no-code platform wherein you can scale these GenAI apps seamlessly, and then you have the entire governance on top of it. So you still get all the governance that you've set up as part of your enterprise, but then you choose a platform that helps you connect to LLMs, connect to vector databases, connect to your enterprise data, and one that provides you explainability and observability. Because at the end of the day, the end users are more likely to trust and adopt AI systems when they understand how they work. And that's why I think explainability is crucial.
Excellent. Manish?
I'm shameless, unlike Bean. So I'm going to, even though Saket's already taken up governance, I'm going to double click on that one. I think getting security, privacy, governance taken care of first is going to be very crucial, because that'll open up a whole bunch of your data that you're currently afraid to access or will access incorrectly and create problems for yourself. And if you have those problems solved, you will give yourself more architectural options in terms of which models you can use, where the models can run, etc.
Great points. Dave?
Focusing on analytics again, I would say, pair a semantic layer with an LLM if you're trying to do natural language query. Just think that you can't do it accurately or trustworthy with trust unless you have business context. And enterprises all have very unique business context that a general purpose LLM cannot understand. So bring semantics, your enterprise semantics, to your LLM, and you got a great partnership.
Great points. And John, will give you the last word.
Yeah, I repeat again, focus most of your efforts on the fundamentals, and that's the intelligence of the models and the relevance and completeness, that is scalability of your data.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. This has been an incredible discussion. Lots of different topics covered, and clearly a lot of expertise on this panel. So thanks to all of you for joining us, and thank you to the audience as well. If you missed any of the webinar today, or you want to rewatch anything, the recording will be available just a few minutes after the webinar. If you refresh this page, we'll also send you all the recording tomorrow, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow morning as well. I want to say a special thank you again to all of our partners that were present here today at Vespa AI, Skyflow, Nextla, Informatica, Galileo, and AtScale. And we'll see you all again next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
Thank you.